As the Israeli-Hamas fighting continues for the 10th straight day, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made no mention of any halt to the offensive as Israeli artillery continues to pound the Gaza Strip. Touring the Israeli Army's Southern Command in Bir Sheba, Netanyahu said that Israel's bombing of Gaza had set Hamas back, quote, many years, adding that there are only two options in front of Israel, either to conquer them or deter them.
Only two ways that you can deal with them. You can either conquer them, and that's always an open possibility, or you can deter them. And we are engaged right now in forceful deterrence, but I have to say, we don't rule out anything. We hope we can restore quiet. We hope we can restore it quickly. I want to say that we're doing that while doing our utmost to avoid civilian casualties.
Deafening airstrikes and rocket fires shook the Gaza Strip overnight amid an international diplomatic push to broker a ceasefire. This comes as U.S. President Joe Biden spoke to Benjamin Netanyahu for the record fourth time. According to the White House, the U.S. president told the Israeli prime minister that he expects, quote, de-escalation today on path to ceasefire. Warplanes hit Gaza City again in the pre-dawn hours, with the Israeli military targeting Hamas leaders and infrastructure. In a 25-minute attack overnight in Gaza, 52 Israeli aircraft struck Hamas tunnels in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. The army said that it had hit, quote, 40 underground Hamas targets. Nearly 450 buildings in the Gaza Strip have been destroyed or badly damaged, including 6 hospitals and 9 primary care health centers. Gaza's only coronavirus testing lab has also been damaged in the strikes. According to the United Nations, over 52,000 Palestinians are currently displaced.
تفاجأنا انه بعد مروحنا من صلاة الفجر والدنيا لا زال حتى الآن الليل، وإذ بصاروخ زنانة بعده ب10 دقائق صاروخ F-16 شالت البيت والبيوت اللي جنب بيتنا، كل البيوت تأثر.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has accused Israel of committing, quote, war crimes, adding that the killings are organized state terrorism carried out by Israel.
ما تقوم به دولة الاحتلال الآن في قطاع غزة من اعتداءات وحشية على المدنيين وقصف متعمد للبيوت والمنشآت وتدميرها على رؤوس سكانها وتدمير للبنية التحتية وقتل للأطفال والشيوخ والنساء هو إرهاب دولة منظم تمارسه دولة الاحتلال الإسرائيلي وجرائم حرب يعاقب عليها القانون الدولي، وسوف لن نتهاون في ملاحقة مرتكبي هذه الجرائم أمام المحاكم الدولية.
The conflict between Israel and Palestine is in its second week, and it's still raging, despite world leaders calling for de-escalation. Aggression from both sides continue. There have been multiple threats to Hamas by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Right now, we are being joined by top Israeli diplomat Alon Pinkas, who has also served as the foreign policy advisors to 4 foreign ministers of Israel. Thank you so much for joining us on WION. You know, heavy airstrikes and rocket fires in the conflict have claimed several lives on both sides, and the numbers are only escalating. We have 200 people so far who have lost their lives in Gaza and at least 12 people in Israel. I'd like to begin by asking you, how can Israel limit civilian casualties in the Gaza Strip?
Israel is not fighting a military force that can be located in military installations or military formations or in military movement. We are fighting against a terror organization that is entrenched in and positions itself deliberately inside and within and deep in population centers. On top of which, Gaza is the most dense area on earth, more than Singapore. Think of downtown Delhi or downtown Calcutta and condense this even more. So it's impossible to avoid civilian deaths, and I say this tragically because it is not helping anyone that innocent civilians are dying. It's not helping, obviously, the families, but it also politically, it's not helping when you try to build some form of stability. So the only way to do that, to avoid that, would be to be very surgical, to be very targeted, to be very precise. I'd like to believe, and I know for a fact that Israel is doing its utmost to achieve that. To tell you that this is a 100% mistake-free and foolproof system, I cannot.
You know, there's been a lot of uproar over the Israeli attack on the building, which housed a number of media outlets in Gaza. Is there a reason that Israel isn't providing proof to the international community that that particular attack was justified?
That's a very good question. I have to say, and you know, this is the benefit of being a former ambassador, a former government official rather than a current, that I happen to think it was a mistake. Even if there was Hamas presence in that building, Israel should either have provided the international media and foreign governments with that information, with irrefutable proof that this indeed is what happens in that building, or avoid bringing down that building altogether. Because in my mind, you know, fighting Hamas is an imperative and a necessity. But sometimes you need to make smart decisions, not just right decisions or just decisions. And I cannot, for the life of me, believe that that building, was of so much strategic importance that it had to be brought down. So in retrospect, I think it was a mistake. Had Israel had in its possession unequivocal, irrefutable, clear proof that that building is used to house Hamas operations, Hamas intelligence, Hamas cyber capabilities, fine. Show it, put it on display, and do what you need to do. I have no qualms about that. To first bring it down and then start saying that it housed Hamas and then failing to prove that it did, or at least failing to prove that the Hamas presence in that building justifies bringing down the building, is a different story.
Regarding the Abraham Accord, do you think that this conflict will push back gains made in the Abraham Accords? And have Israel's allies extended any kind of support?
I doubt that very much. Obviously, it depends on political developments inside Israel. We had a fourth election in 2 years that failed to produce a clear result. No one seems to be able to form a government right now, so we may conceivably be looking at a fifth election around September or October, this coming September or October, maybe even August, but I'm just giving you the broad time frame. I don't see any peace process in terms of the as a result of this flare-up. In terms of Israel's allies, well, that depends. You know, in the Security Council, the U.S.'s veto was divided by 15, so it was 14 for the resolution or the statement, and just the U.S. vetoing it on grounds of imbalanced wording. Israel has some allies in Europe that have succeeded in foiling, because of the way the European Union is structured, and that requires unanimous decisions on foreign policy. So one or two Israeli allies, notably Hungary and Austria, have managed to foil European Union condemnations and statements. But that is tactical, that is very local, that is very temporary. I don't know that this is necessarily going to last beyond the next few days.
You know, there's been a lot of talk about the Palestinians in East Jerusalem and their concerns. Is their reaction, in your opinion, justified? And how will this impact a two-state solution?
So these are three distinct questions. I'll answer them in sequence. Am I aware? Am I sympathetic to? Am I understanding of the Palestinian indignation and frustration and concerns? Absolutely. Do I justify their reactions? No. Do I justify everything Israel is doing in East Jerusalem? No, I do not. You cannot condone violence. You know, the discrimination and inequality and injustice, yes, they exist. None of which justifies what's been going on in East Jerusalem. Now, in terms of a law, you know, how this affects a two-state solution, look, the fact that we don't have a two-state solution in place, or the fact that many people are beginning to dismiss the plausibility or viability of such a solution, has to do with two things. One is fundamental, and that is two sides that are still clenching to and hugging their national narratives, which are zero-sum narratives. If I'm right, he has to be wrong. If I admit that he has some justice, then I am subtracting from my own case. That has to stop. It's easier said on television between you and I, but it's emotional, it's religious, it's national, it's ethnic, it is social, it is cultural. It has too many facets, and to think that for 25 years we've been actively talking about a two-state solution, not just as an idea, but as a policy, and we have not reached that point, has to do with this, this attachment, this refusal to let go of narratives. The second thing is the absence, the really tragic, and I say this, you know, not easily, really tragic shortage of an absence of leadership on both sides. Now, particularly the Palestinians, but I will not absolve Israel of its own lack of leadership in the last 10 years of doing the right thing, because, not because I respect Palestinian rights, but because I worry and care about my own country's security. The idea that both sides lack the necessary leadership, the courage, the boldness to look beyond the petty differences, to look beyond narratives, is tragic. Palestinians' fault that they don't have a state until now. It's our responsibility to resolve that, because we will bear the consequences of their mistake. And so I don't know that these events in Jerusalem or Gaza necessarily have a direct effect on the two-state solution, but I can tell you this, that the two-state solution is almost proclaimed dead right now. It'll take a political miracle to resuscitate it.
So if not a two-state solution, then what is the solution?
There are essentially 4 different scenarios, okay? I don't want to dwell too much and burden your viewers, but here it is. One is, you know, a political process that leads to a two-state solution, okay? That's a preferred option. As I said before, it's almost null and void and dead. The second would be that the Palestinians will renounce their national aspirations and ask for a one binational state. They will ask to be annexed by Israel and accordingly become citizens and be enfranchised. Okay, that is something that Israel cannot even fathom, because that will completely change the demographic balance between the West Bank and Israel proper. In Gaza, you have approximately 13 million people, maybe slightly more. And if you add everyone together, it's almost a demographic equilibrium. The third option would be the status quo. Just, you know, manage the conflict, help the Palestinians economically, avoid any kind of confrontation, and let them do a BOT, a build, operate, transfer. And in 10 years, we'll see if this is a viable state. Not start with the state, start with the process. The last option would be